I'm Ronnie, and I grew up homeless in City Heights, San Diego.
What were you exposed to in City Heights?
City Heights was a fun place to grow up in. I know I saw a lot of violence. I saw drug use. Most memorably, I saw a lot of poverty, especially growing up homeless. My mom was very close to a lot of homeless people, a lot of prostitutes. A lot of people were just struggling to survive, make ends meet.
How did your childhood look like growing up homeless in City Heights?
Growing up homeless in City Heights, I was fortunate enough to find Morgan's Motel. It was a constant burden of fear. And every month I was scared that I'd end up back on the streets, under a lamppost, somewhere I didn't want to be. I carried the stress of my family's poverty starting at a really young age. I was in the 7th grade and my mom had lost her job because my father was caught stealing at her work. My family went on sort of a downward spiral from then. During my childhood, my mom was struggling with depression, and she also had a drug addiction that was taking over her sense to work. Growing up, my dad was in and out of prison. When he was in prison, I was the man of the house, and when he was out of prison, he was the toxic man of the house. I mean, he was verbally abusive to my brother and my mom, and he made living in a motel worse, if that was even possible.
What was your mindset during that time?
To be honest, I cursed my parents. I resented them. Honestly, I hated them for forcing me and my brother to grow up in those really, really harsh circumstances. I felt like it was their fault, and I didn't feel proud to be a part of my family.
How did your former mindset affect your current relationship with your parents?
It enhanced it, I would say. I grew up really angry. I grew up with a lot of hate, and it was because I didn't know where I came from. I didn't know what my family history looked like. I didn't know what I was all about. And I felt lost, to be honest. When I got to college, it was really hard for me to feel like I belonged anywhere. And it wasn't until I started to learn about the war on drugs and I started to learn about the criminalization of the poor. It really showed me that my parents were victims to a system that was put against them. I started to understand why I grew up in the circumstances that I did, and I started to have more grace, and I started to heal. I honestly believe that healing was because I started to critically analyze the history that was being put in front of me. I started to realize that the history that my parents lived in wasn't made for them to succeed. I mean, my mother, she was from Los Angeles, Compton, and grew up during the crack epidemic. Was a chola, ran with gangs in the street, and my father was an immigrant from Peru. He immigrated here when he was in the 3rd grade.
What is something you learned from class that helped you heal your current relationship with your parents?
To start off, I haven't healed my relationship with my parents, but I would say it has started, for sure. My dad was deported to Peru last year, and my mom is still homeless in City Heights, so I still feel a large disconnect from them. My classes have really helped me understand where my parents came from. It really helped me understand why I lived in the circumstances that I did. Learning about the war on drugs and learning about how poor communities were criminalized and over-policed, the way it led to more people being arrested, it led to more people being harmed, it led to more people being addicted to opioids, and it made me see my parents' story in a different light. Growing up, I focused on my story, on what I was going through, and learning about the war on drugs, I started to think about my parents' story, and that gave me empathy for them, and it started to heal how I saw my parents. Growing up, we're taught lessons in history, lessons about America, American history, but we're not taught how to connect those stories to ourselves. We're not taught how to see them in our parents. I started to see my parents' story in a different light, and it started to heal the hate and the resentment I felt for them.
What is a piece of advice that you can give to people who can relate to you?
I would advise people to have grace and empathy for their families, and to tell their story, and to learn to love their story, and to hate complacency.
La tristeza y de mis ojos que lloran en silencio.